Good morning. My name is Katie Gadd, and I have the pleasure of being your service leader this morning. We are a lay-led congregation, and throughout the year we explore a wide range of topics and themes with presentations made by members of our congregation and the wider community. We always open our services with a territorial acknowledgement, and I want to emphasize, given recent events, how important it is to recognize our nation's history of stolen lands and cultures that have led to systemic racism and oppression. A territorial acknowledgement is a small step in striving to be accountable, while we work to understand the numerous historic and present injustices faced by our Indigenous people. Our congregation is on the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation and of the Anishinaabe peoples. These lands have also been home to the Chinantong or Attawandaron people, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Métis. We express gratitude for the sharing of these lands as we strive to cultivate respect in our relationships with Indigenous peoples and the land. Today, our service celebrates Pride Month with a message from our minister, the Reverend Peter Boulada, on our mutual relatedness, and I'll introduce Peter more when we come to his talk. Our Unitarian spiritual community celebrates diversity in many aspects. We welcome people of all ages, races, genders, sexual orientations, socioeconomic, and religious backgrounds. And if you are coming here for the first time virtually, we welcome you. Our coming together is on purpose. We are in search of community, connection, and meaning in this complex world we live in. And we welcome all who want to join us in this purpose. We are deeply rooted in the Unitarian Universalist principles, which provide a spiritual basis for ethical living, and you can find these on our website. In this service, we will use the acronym LGBTQ, which stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, queer, plus. Note that the plus refers to the diversity of gender and sexual identities and labels that make up our rainbow communities. We are using this as a respectful short form, the intention being not to exclude anyone, but to make our language manageable. In light of our territorial acknowledgement, however, I did want to make special mention of the term two-spirited, which is used by some First Nations communities to refer to those who embody both the male and the female spirit, and should be used in the longer form of the LGBTQ+ acronym. So our opening words this morning are a compilation from our community in celebration of the work that has been done by the Unitarian Congregation of Guelph and many other Unitarian congregations to be more welcoming to our LGBTQ+ communities at large. And I always like to point out to my students that on our Unitarian Congregation of Guelph history timeline, that there's a newspaper article from 1999 in which it says, "Church opens doors to gays." So that was front page news in 1999, which in their minds, of course, is ancient history, but in my mind, it is relatively recent. And for the last 25 years, the Unitarian Universalist Association has been working towards a certification of welcoming. And that is work that our congregation has undertaken as well. Most recently, in order to try and increase our welcoming towards those in the transgender community. So the compilation this morning is of our community members saying what welcoming looks like to them.
So welcoming is, for me, smiling faces and also good snacks, but that's really David's thing.
Hey, welcoming to me is having a gender and inclusivity fair like UCG did.
Welcoming to me is smiling faces.
Welcoming community to me is one that displays a rainbow all year round.
One of the things I found most welcoming about the UCG when first entering was not only the rainbow flag that drew Cheryl and I in, but the beautiful painting of the canoe in the river surrounded by trees. And for me, my spirituality has always been connected to nature, so coming into the congregation and seeing that nature reflected on the walls just made me feel right at home. And canoe being empty was so inviting. It just seemed to welcome me into my own spiritual journey, embraced by community, the community of trees and the community of people, both of which I cherish.
For me, welcoming is the difference between being tolerated and being celebrated. Each week at the congregation, hearing words like, we welcome people of all genders, people of all sexual orientations, races, and abilities, those words are very meaningful.
To me, welcoming is a community where I know my kids are safe from hurtful comments about their identity. Thank you, UCG.
Being a welcoming space for me means being a place where people are celebrated because love is love, and that people are celebrated whatever their gender expression, and honestly that we push back on societal constructs that limit the expression and being of others. Happy Pride.
In this flame, we witness the power of transformation. Awed again by the wonder of life, we are grateful to be vital to this living universe and inspiring community.
Well, we are lucky to be in a community that is working towards being more welcoming and knows it has a long way to go still. We know that LGBTQ plus individuals and communities have faced tremendous struggles in the past and continue to do so today. This journey has taken tremendous courage. Terry Lynn Coward-Ouellette from the Rainbow Chorus wrote the song that we are about to hear, called "We Are Still Here." It was written in 2016 following the killing of 49 people in a gay nightclub in Orlando. After we listen to her beautiful song, we will go to the story for all ages.
Heavy hearts, broken dreams, falling apart at the seams. You ask me, are we okay? Are we fine here? Coloring outside the lines. But honestly, I've got a heavy heart and bleeding soul. This news has taken hold. must commemorate the lives lost, the dreams left behind. We are still here. We must celebrate our pride strong. Show we belong, but honestly, I've got a heavy heart. A heavy heart. How do we build strength today? How do we show we're okay? How do we motivate? 'Cause I retreat and I repeat naturally. How do we overcome defeat and repeat when we've got heavy hearts, heavy hearts, heavy hearts, heavy hearts? Where do we even start? We start with, we are still here. We must commemorate the lives lost, the dreams left behind. We are still here. We must celebrate our pride strong. Show we belong. We belong. Heavy hearts, heavy hearts. Where do we even start? We start with us.
Hi, I'm Margie, and today I'm reading the story, Who Are You? And who are you?
I'm Sequoia.
You're Sequoia. Who am I? I'm Margie. I'm your mom. And I'm a lot of other things too. A teacher, a friend, a wife, a daughter. We're all so many things. And gender is just one of the things that makes up who we are. This book is called The Kid's Guide to Gender Identity by Brooke Pesson-Wedby, illustrated by Naomi Bardoff. This is a story about you. The important thing to remember is that you are the one who knows you best. When babies are born, people ask, is it a boy or a girl? Babies can't talk, so grown-ups make a guess by looking at their bodies. This is the sex assigned to you at birth, male or female. Sometimes people get this confused with gender, but gender is much more than the body you were born with. As babies grow into kids, they start to know what they like and don't like. This is your personal expression, what you like, how you dress and act. There are so many ways to express yourself. What you like can change as you grow up, or even from day to day. What do you like? So on this page, Sequoia, what do you like?
I like that dress, and that tutu, and the fairy wings.
Sequoia quite likes fashion and the clothes she wears. And lots of kids love fashion and care about the clothes they wear. Kids of all genders. Kids know a lot about themselves. They know who they are by how they feel inside. This is your identity. Who you feel like inside. Who you know yourself to be. This can also change as you grow up, or change from day to day. Your gender is just one part of your identity, what makes you, you. Some people say there are only two genders, but there are really many genders. I am girl, boy, both, neither, just me. You are who you say you are, because you know you best. For some people, the grown-ups guessed right about their body and their gender. This is called cisgender, when someone's identity matches their sex assigned at birth. And for some people, there are more than just two choices. These are just a few words people use. Trans, gender queer, non-binary, gender fluid, transgender, gender neutral, agender, neutros, bigender, third gender, two-spirit. And there are even more words people are using to describe their experience. This is called the gender spectrum. There are lots of ways to be a boy. There are lots of ways to be a girl. There are lots of ways to be a kid. And I would add, there are lots of ways to be an adult. Be who you are.
It is now time for the offering. Many people offer their time and their talent to make our congregation work on a regular basis. Many people also contribute financially, yearly or monthly, to ensure that we can maintain this community for us all. If you are able to, please consider donating through our website.
Hi everyone. We've now come to the part of the service where we share our joys and concerns that the community have sent over the past week. I'll place a stone in the water for each one. We show our support with the response. We hear you. Hannah B. offers a stone of thanks for the June 7th service. I appreciated that there was a call to justice and a call to action within the content. I would love to hear more about the active resistance of Black folks in our community and worldwide. I have always known the Unitarian congregation to be engaged in anti-oppression and value supporting critical movements tied to racial justice. I hope to hear more acknowledgments of the current movement that Black folks are leading. Can the congregation in future services bring light to this and how white folks can uplift and honor what the Black folks are asking right now? A stone for the many Black lives that have been lost due to inequality, hate, and broken systems, for their grieving families and communities, for all the other ways that anti-Black racism has manifested and impacted their lives. A stone for their fight for survival, recognition, and justice. For white folks to join in this fight and stand with them. For white folks to look inside and unpack what it would be taught about Blackness and to challenge the status quo. We hear you, Hannah B. Margie would like to share 3 stones. I'd like to offer a stone in memory of my brother-in-law's father who passed away recently. I'm sending lots of love to the whole family, especially since this particularly challenging time to have lost a loved one. The second stone is for another life lost. Sadly, this is for someone quite young, a former member of the Rainbow Chorus who died this week. They were a beautiful person and who will be missed by many. Sending love to those who are grieving at this time. My final stone is one of hope. It was wonderful to see such strength and solidarity demonstrated at last Saturday's Black Lives Matter protest in Guelph. May this be a true time of shifting to end the racism experienced by Black Canadians and people of color around the world. We hear you, Margie. Martha offers a stone of joy for the spirit of pitch and helpfulness around our congregation. In drawing up a list of folks who have volunteered at UCG this year, it came to 53 names of people who have generously shared their time and talents to make this community what it is. Way to go, team. We hear you, Marta. I will place the final rock for the joys and concerns that are unspoken but remain in our hearts.
We will now enter a time of meditation and reflection. Please find a quiet spot where you can sit comfortably. Put your feet on the ground to center yourself if you'd like. So I'd encourage you to meditate on how you can answer these calls in your own life after I read these powerful words written by Julia Corbett Hemeyer. I will ring the gong afterwards to mark the beginning and then ring it again to mark the end of the meditation. In the face of hate, we answer the call of love. In the face of exclusion, we answer the call of inclusion. In the face of homophobia, we answer the call of LGBTQ+ rights. In the face of racism, we answer the call of justice for all races. In the face of xenophobia, we answer the call of pluralism. In the face of misogyny, we answer the call of women's rights. In the face of demagoguery, we answer the call of reason. In the face of religious intolerance, we answer the call of diversity. In the face of narrow nationalism, we answer the call of global community. In the face of bigotry, we answer the call of open-mindedness. In the face of despair, we answer the call of hope. As Unitarian Universalists, we answer the call of love, now more than ever.
Before the lockdown, before COVID-19, it seems like many years ago now, I was in another city. I was traveling, and I had the opportunity to work out at a gym in the city where I was staying. It was a YMCA, one of those old 19th century buildings that had been renovated. The third floor of that gym had a weight room and cardiovascular equipment. An old running track encircled the perimeter of part of the third floor that looked out over onto a basketball court on the second floor. So I found myself puffing away on a stationary bike, looking out over onto this basketball court on the on the floor below me, there were some young people down there, boys, playing basketball. On the one side of the court, a group of probably 16 or 17-year-olds was playing a game. And at the far end of the court, another set of young people, a little bit younger, was playing a separate game. One group, the older group, looked like they were having a good game. They were passing the ball, taking shots, cheering their teammates on. It was apparent that they loved the game and knew its rules. When somebody traveled with the ball or double dribbled, both teams recognized it. When there was a foul, the players would all recognize it and line up for the foul shot. On the other side of the court, a different game was being played. These younger boys seemed to be spending a lot of their time shouting at each other. Their game stopped every other minute as they argued about whether the one with the ball had traveled with it, whether it was a foul or not. There seemed to be a lot of charging and blocking. There seemed to be a lot of did not, did so. Frankly, it didn't look like a whole lot of fun to me. As I continued my own cardiovascular workout, I watched and I pondered. Both sets of players knew how basketball was played. Why did it seem like one game needed a referee and the other didn't? I paid closer attention to the one game. There was a kind of competitiveness between the players. And I don't just mean between the teams. There were show-offs, little Dennis Rodmans. Remember Dennis Rodman? Little Dennis Rodmans in the making, who wanted attention, who wanted to display their individual talent. There was also a kind of, rancor sounds a little too severe, but a kind of rancorous competition between the teams, an attempt to win the game by accusing the other side of breaking the rules, waiting with hawk-like attention for the slightest infraction on the other side. It was a game bogged down by litigation. The overriding desire was to win, and win by any means, and not necessarily to have fun. There was, it seemed to me, a lack of trust, an absence of allowing that others would make the right decision with the ball or do the right thing. The players on the other side of the basketball court were not just older, they were more mature. With maturity comes knowing when you are wrong and promptly admitting it. There was trust that each player intended to do the right thing. There was a willingness to submit to the game, to subsume one's individual will to the larger flow of give and take. There was teamwork. There was recognition, a mutual recognition that the rules needed to be followed, not challenged, and to examine one's own actions in addition to checking those of others. These young people were gifted with what seemed to me like humility and grace in their basketball playing. There was a dedication to the team and a respect for all players. In short, they exhibited what used to be called sportsmanship. A sportsman, the dictionary tells us, is somebody of any gender who loves the game and shows fairness and generosity. When a person of any gender is a good sport, when someone's being a sport, they're being fair and cheerful and generous. More than loving the game and abiding by its rules, a person exhibits sportsmanship. They're a good sport when they are giving and even-handed. Being a good sport is as much about enjoying the game as it is about winning. It is also about courtesy and respect, cursing at other players, making obscene gestures toward the fans of the opposing team in the stands, trashing the locker room when you lose. These are all antithetical. It's the antithesis of sportsmanship. Passions inevitably rise during a game, especially if it's a good game or a close game or the finals. The good sport is restrained, disciplined. In playing fair, all players need to know and understand the agreed upon way to play the game and abide by them. The one basketball game that I was observing was marked by grace and discipline because this was what every player assumed. Every player was responsible for upholding the regulations and conventions of the game. Without that sense of individual responsibility, there would be chaos, kept in check only by an outside authority, say a referee or a judge or an umpire. I began to wonder, what would it look like if all our human interactions were marked by that sense of organic grace and discipline? In some ways, a congregation is a microcosm of the wider world. Only as a piece of the wider world, there's a border around a congregation that marks it apart. Within the boundaries of a congregation, you are able to create a society, a culture even, based on what you value. What happens here in the Unitarian congregation of Guelph is our basketball game. What kind of game are we playing? And I know there was a book in the 60s or 70s called Games That People Play, or like we talk about people being a player. I don't mean that kind of a game. What I mean is, to an outside observer, someone up in the balcony, what does our basketball game look like? Do we need a referee? Are some people sitting on the bench on the sidelines, waiting for a chance to be in the game? Who are they and why are they there? Are there star players who hog the ball? Does the locker room ever get trashed? Is there squabbling about the mutually agreed upon way to play the game? Or does everybody know and understand what they are? Is there team spirit here? Is there sportsmanship? Is there trust, humility, grace, discipline? What are the ground rules? How are they articulated? Those of you who, like me, are relative newcomers will appreciate how, or if you've ever been a newcomer in a congregation or anywhere else, we usually find out about the unwritten rules in a congregation by doing something wrong, right? You find out what these unwritten rules and assumptions are by doing something which you think is perfectly okay, but that is considered inappropriate. Well, you can't sit there. That's where so-and-so always sits. That's their seat. In some congregations, it's about who serves the coffee and who arranges the flowers or who organizes the Christmas luncheon. In other congregations, it's about the place of children in the community or the color of the choir robes or a sacrosanct order of service in which the announcements have to come after the choral anthem, after the sermon, and if not, the world will come to its apocalyptic conclusion. Just try changing something like that. There are other habits and patterns in a congregation's common life that underlie everything else. Habits and patterns that are also articulated only when they are ignored. But articulating what those conventions are only when someone violates them can be a little dangerous. Do you only know that you value civility when somebody fires off a flaming email or disrupts a meeting with a raised voice? You want to be able to make sure that everybody knows the mutually agreed upon standard before something like that happens. What's more, you want everybody to be responsible for upholding them. So it is not up to the minister or the board chair to enforce the rules. Each and every person is able to say, you know what, that's not okay. We don't do that here. Everybody's empowered to say that. Some congregations develop written agreements about how they will interact and be with one another. They're sometimes called a covenant of right relation or a behavioral covenant. UCG, as far as I know, doesn't have one. And if you email me and say, oh, we do have one, it's on the Google Drive or it's in Dropbox, you might as well not have one, because I've been here 6 months now and I have not seen a behavioral covenant anywhere. I like the term covenant of right relation better than a behavioral covenant. It sounds more befitting a faith community. Behavioral sounds really kind of clinical. The other reason that I like to think in terms of right relation rather than behavior is one is holistic and the other is individualistic. It's not just about how I as an individual behave, but about how we all relate to one another. Right relation, not in the sense of right or wrong, but right in the sense of being in balance. When you write a crooked picture frame, it's in balance. And like justice, which is often depicted as the scales of justice, there's a sense of balance when you are relating well to others and others are relating well to you. So that's what I mean by right relation. It seems more holistic and relational. Unitarian Universalist congregations each have a covenant of some kind, an agreement of how members will be together. It's often recited at the beginning of every Sunday service. It's sometimes called a unison affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. Something like that. We don't do that at UCG, I've noticed. But most Unitarian Universalist congregations have a covenant of some kind, because ours is not a doctrinal religion. It is relational. We don't say, you need to believe this list of doctrines in order to belong here. We agree to be together as a community in a certain way, respecting each individual's right and responsibility to come to their own convictions about what they believe, for example. This is the essence of the Unitarian Universalist way. Because this is so, we need to pay special attention to relationships. Because this is our great promise to one another as a congregation and as a religious movement. A covenant for a Unitarian Universalist congregation is its agreed upon way to play the game. A covenant is the articulation of expectations of how the game will be played. This is especially true of a covenant of right relation. More broadly, a Unitarian Universalist congregation has an agreed upon statement of principles or a basis of unity. often a Unitarian Universalist congregation will adapt one of our historic covenants, like love is the doctrine of this church, or so on. You might have heard, you can find some of these at the back of the Great Hymnal. Those of you who have participated in worship at Grand River Unitarian Congregation know that they recite something. They recite their covenant at the beginning of every Sunday service, and they have it engraved or printed at the wall at the front, on the wall at the front of their sanctuary. But broadly speaking, a covenant is a congregation's self-understanding, an understanding of and an articulation of how its members will be together. It is about what the congregation values and what you individually promise to uphold. The promises a congregation makes about how its members will act with one another and with the world. At the heart of each of our Unitarian Universalist congregations is a promise. The promise we make when we join, the promise we make when we engage with the life of a local congregation. We are covenanted communities, communities made up of individuals who are responsible for the wellness of the whole, individuals who promise to uphold the health of the whole. A covenant is inherently relational. You make a promise to others with whom you constitute this congregation. Because our liberal religious movement is relational and not doctrinal, how you relate to one another in this place is of utmost importance. The kind of importance that other religions place on their doctrines or their scriptures or creeds, we place on relationships. Are you respectful and caring, engaged and attentive to others? Relationship in our religious movement has that utmost importance. I don't know how else to say it. How mindful are we of how we relate to one another? One of the historic principles of our religious movement has been the affirmation of the inherent dignity and worth of every person. A person's value is intrinsic, their goodness inborn. This optimistic view of humanity originally comes to us from the biblical tradition that affirms that human beings of all genders are made in the image and likeness of God. We are bearers by virtue of being human and alive of divinity, imprinted as we are with the imago Dei, the image of God. This is how our Unitarian and Universalist forebears spoke. Human interaction, then, how we behave toward one another, how we structure our societies and our economies, ought never lose sight of the holiness of each person, the inherent dignity and worth of every individual. We can be reminded of the words of George Fox, who was the founder of the Society of Friends, the Quakers, who spoke of that of God in each person, or the inner light, the inward light that each person bears and is sacred. In our encounter with others, fellow congregants, neighbors, co-workers, family members, what would it take to remember their sacredness, their holiness, their divinity, and look upon them as the representation of the divine? I think of the salute from India and Nepal, Namaste, which means the divine in me honors the divine in you. That of God in me greets that which is of God in you. That which is holy in me reveres that which is holy in you. The light within me responds to the light within you. While our historic Unitarian and Universalist testimonies have stressed the goodness of humanity, we have recognized that human beings are not perfect, but we are perfectible. It is possible to work on ourselves and on our relationships. 19th century Unitarians spoke about culture and self-culture. Culture in the sense of like agriculture, right? You're growing or cultivating or nurturing, I guess would be another way of putting it, the self, your better self. Our agreements represent our aspirations. And we need to recognize when we fall short of those desires and objectives while continuing to aspire toward the best of who we can be together. We are imperfect but perfectible. We can get better at being more compassionate, more thoughtful. We seek to always see the best in another, even when that is difficult. Living this out is not easy. Living this out in a time when the structures of racism and white supremacy are being unmasked so dramatically is not easy, and not just because it's difficult for us to advocate for the humanity of racialized people, the humanity of people of color, the humanity of Black people, the inherent dignity and worth of Indigenous people, people of color. But also because we aspire to recognize the inherent dignity and worth of people for whom we find it difficult to do that, including police officers, the RCMP, the torturers and the jailers and the human rights abusers, right? Like their inherent dignity and worth isn't something that we can vote on and withdraw from them. It's inherent. It's inborn. And I think that is one of the challenges that we as people of faith, but also as Unitarian Universalists have in this time. And there is something to be said for a covenant of being, which is larger than the congregation. And it's something that I actually would like to spend more time with you exploring. What does that interconnection and mutual dependence look like outside the bounds of a UU congregation, outside the boundaries of a particular congregation? How do we relate with mutuality and interdependence with the larger society in which we are embedded and to which we need to witness to our values? The difficulty of living out the repercussions of affirming the inherent dignity and worth of every person. That challenge is it's the difference between those two basketball games that I was observing. One had internalized the game's conventions and played it with ease and with grace. The other had not. One had made sportsmanship their habit and their practice. The other had not. The one had cultivated mutual respect among the players. The other had not. None of the written agreements in the world will make a difference if the values it represents are not cultivated within an individual's heart and mind. No agreement in the world will make a difference if the virtues it means to uphold are not cultivated within an individual's life. The work of being community requires each of its members to cultivate trust, trustworthiness, humility, The work of being together requires each of its members to cultivate graciousness and discipline, and for those to be the common assumption. Good congregational life is nurtured by each of its members growing in grace. Good congregational life is nurtured and strengthened by each of its members understanding, respecting, and upholding a covenant of right relation. When you come together as a community, there is something larger than one's individual wants and needs, and it takes grace and discipline to maintain equilibrium between self and community. One enters into the life of the community with a spirit of cheerfulness and generosity. You acknowledge and accept when something you've advocated for is not taken up by the rest, and you let it go. You recognize when you are wrong and promptly admit it. Recognize when you have been wronged and promptly seek to rectify it. This is the spirit of a true covenanted community, whatever words on a page might say. And it's the spirit that we need to take into the broader world at this time. What I wish for all of us as we continue our journey together is that our lives be so graced by the spirit of trust and humility, that our common life together as a congregation be graced by cooperation and respect. May it be so.
Our congregation has been lucky enough to have had several services where the Rainbow Chorus of Guelph, Wellington has joined us. Today, they have been generous enough to share their song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, with us.
We gathered to light this chalice. We part the flame lit within us, an inspired community.
Today's announcements. Please mark your calendars for June 19th, which is Juneteenth, celebrating the anniversary of the historical moment when Union soldiers announced the end of slavery in Galveston, Texas on June 19th, 1865. Please also mark your calendars for June 20th, which is World Refugee Day. Also, please send us a photo of yourself offering a flower, any flower, to be included in the flower communion for the June 28th service. So you can email your photo to sundayservices@guelph-unitarians.com. Please join us for a discussion about our service on Zoom at 11:30. The link will be included at the end of this service. So I'd like to thank Reverend Peter for his words this morning, Margie for arranging the music from the Rainbow Chorus. They're the choir members of the Rainbow Chorus, and Margie as well for the children's story today. Cheryl and family for the chalice lighting and extinguishing. Janice for the joys and concerns. All who contributed to our welcoming video sequence and pictures. And John, Martha, and Charlotte Savage and Dave Beaton for their technical assistance. Thank you, and we hope to see you.